I never wanted revenge. Not at first. But the day I unfolded that faded county land survey map, the one that would change everything, I realized fate had already placed a knife in my hand. All I had to do was choose whether to twist it. The map lay flat on my truck bed, corners pinned down by a socket wrench, a thermos of coffee, and a rock I grabbed from the ditch. Red ink outlined a massive rectangle, 1,500 acres of forest, hills, creeks, and, apparently, one more thing, an entire suburban HOA that had no idea they were squatting on my land. I stared at the neat little grid of houses, a perfect slice of cookie-cutter suburbia, planted smack in the middle of my property. And I laughed. Not a light chuckle, not amusement. A full, soul-deep laugh, the kind someone lets out when the universe hands them something so absurd, so impossibly ironic, it feels scripted. These were the same people who, only 6 months earlier, had dragged me through a humiliating legal mess in Blackwell County. People who had mocked me, undermined me, fined me, and embarrassed me publicly, all because of a zoning dispute that I had unknowingly been right about the entire time. They had taken everything from me, my business, my reputation, my peace. But now I realized fate had placed me on the opposite side of the chessboard. Their HOA, Grey Ridge Estates, was sitting on my land like ants clustered on a picnic blanket. And they had no clue. The thought simmered in me as I ran my fingers over the parcel number stamped on the map. Verified, filed, recorded, mine, every square inch. The realtor had joked I was getting the deal of the century, a huge tract of land at a suspiciously low price because an estate needed it gone fast. She'd had no idea the value of what she was selling. Truth be told, neither had I. Until now, Grey Ridge Estates was picturesque in the most irritating way possible. Clean sidewalks, matching mailboxes, manicured lawn trimmed so precisely it looked like they'd been cut with scissors. The kind of neighborhood where people waved at each other the same way politicians did. Big smiles that never reached their eyes. And me? I didn't belong here. Not after the way they treated me last spring. I still remember the first HOA letter I ever received, the one that had been taped to my trailer door in bold red ink. Your property appears to be in violation. Correct immediately or be fined. No greeting. No explanation. Just that I'd built a small workshop shed on what I believed to be my land. Their land, they claimed. Turns out, neither of us knew the truth back then. They fined me. They sued me. They harassed me. And when the court ruled in their favor, based on inaccurate records that have now surfaced as corrected, they didn't just celebrate. They mocked me. Publicly. I can still hear their president, Richard Holston, telling the crowd at the HOA meeting. Some people just don't understand rules or basic property lines. The audience had laughed. My face had burned. And my business, my woodworking shop, died under the weight of fines, legal fees, and small-town rumors. But now I held the original deed to all the land under their feet. Every yard, every street, every concrete driveway, even their precious community pool. And as I drove past their stone entrance sign, Grey Ridge Estates, a premier lifestyle community, I couldn't help asking myself, what would they do when they learned the truth? The first to notice me was a jogger in neon shorts, earbuds in. She gave me the suspicious once-over people reserved for strangers in middle-class neighborhoods, a mix of caution and mild disdain. I kept driving. The HOA clubhouse loomed ahead. It was a 2-story building with white trim and a navy blue sign, the kind built to look more expensive than it actually was. Their board would be meeting soon. They always met on the first Tuesday of the month. Conveniently, that was today. I parked my truck right in front. On purpose. The clubhouse receptionist, a crisp woman with a sharper haircut, peeked over her glasses as I walked in. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone implying she preferred not to. "Yes," I said. "I have business with the board." Her lips tightened the way people's do when they are calculating whether you're someone they should respect or someone they should dismiss. "And you are?" I set the thick folder of documentation on her desk with a soft thud. "Elias Carter," I said. "Landowner." A flicker of confusion crossed her face. "I'm sorry. Are you here about the zoning request? Those need to be scheduled weeks." "No," I said calmly. "I'm here because your entire neighborhood is built on the wrong land." She blinked, then blinked again. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The weight of the statement hung in the air like a dropped chandelier. Before she could respond, the boardroom door opened and out stepped Richard Holston himself. Tan, polished, wearing a blazer that screamed I own 3 boats but only use one. His eyes met mine. They narrowed instantly. You, he said, voice laced with contempt. Me, I replied. What are you doing here? I smiled slowly, savoring the moment like the first sip of bourbon after a long winter. I'm here, I said, lifting the folder, because you and everyone in this HOA are about to learn something very important. His jaw tightened. And what would that be? That you've been living on my land for the past 17 years. Silence. The receptionist's pen clattered onto her desk. Someone down the hallway dropped a stack of papers. Richard's face drained a color. Your land, he repeated, as if the words were poison. I opened the folder and slid the first document toward him. The deed, I said, filed with the county. Original boundaries. Survey maps. Historical plats. All verified. All legally binding. He stared at the papers, hands shaking just enough for me to notice. Behind him, several board members hovered, their faces shifting from confusion to horror. I leaned in. You once asked me if I understood property lines, I said. Turns out, I understand them better than you ever will. Richard swallowed hard. What do you want? Now that was a question, wasn't it? The question that would determine everything to come. Did I want money? Power? Control? Revenge? All of the above? I glanced around the clubhouse, the polished floors, the smug decor, the air of entitlement these people breathed like oxygen. What did I want? I smiled. You'll find out soon enough, I said. This is just a beginning. And as I walked out the door, leaving the board in stunned silence, one thought burned bright in my mind. If Grey Ridge Estates was a kingdom, then the homeowners believed themselves as nobility, untouchable, safe behind their perfectly trimmed hedges and neatly painted shutters. But by the time the sun rose the next morning, I had already set in motion the first tremor that would crack their porcelain paradise. I woke before dawn, the sky still a bruised shade of blue, and brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Today was not about confrontation. Today was about letting the board, and everyone under them, realize that the foundation of their lives was no longer solid ground. It was mine. The deed documents had been filed and cross-verified with the county overnight. My lawyer, a quiet man named Ulrich who approached legal conflict with the patience of a monk and the aggression of a rabid wolf, had emailed me at 3:14 a.m. with a single line. Everything is valid. Proceed. And proceed I did. By 8 a.m., a convoy of white county utility trucks rolled into Grey Ridge Estates like a silent army. Not my doing directly, but the consequence of truth hitting bureaucracy like a sledgehammer. The first truck stopped at the HOA's entrance. The second parked near the community pool. A third positioned itself right at the center of the neighborhood park, Grey Ridge Pride, with its quaint playground and little gazebo where they held summer concerts. From my vantage point at the edge of the main street, leaning casually against my truck, I watched the chaos unfold. A middle-aged woman walking a golden retriever froze mid-step. She stared at the workers unloading surveying equipment, confusion carved deep into her features. Another homeowner, watering his gardenias, set down his hose and marched toward them with a typical HOA arrogance, chin up, shoulders back, voice dripping with entitlement before he even opened his mouth. "Excuse me," he called, waving an impatient hand. "What do you think you're doing?" One of the county surveyors, a burly guy with sun-creased skin and an orange vest, didn't even look up when he answered. "Official land reassessment," he said. "For what?" the man demanded. The surveyor tapped his clipboard. "Boundary confirmation." That one phrase detonated like a grenade. Residents began trickling out of their houses, robe-wearing, coffee-sipping, suspicion-filled suburbanites who had not expected their quiet cul-de-sacs to be invaded by county personnel with official-looking papers. Phones came out. Whispers started. Tension crackled in the morning air. And I stayed silent, watching, because today wasn't about me stepping forward. Today was about letting the truth seep into their minds like cold water into porous stone. At 9:03 a.m., President Richard Holston emerged from his colonial-style house in a brisk, furious stride, tie flapping, hair still damp. He spotted me immediately. Of course he did. I offered him a pleasant wave. His expression curdled. "What have you done?" Richard hissed as he approached. "Oh, morning," I said mildly. "Sleep well." His eyes flashed. "Carter, you listen to me." "It's Mr. Carter now," I corrected. "Landowner has a certain ring to it." "This is harassment," he snapped, gesturing wildly at the county workers. "You can't just send trucks to." "I didn't send anyone." He froze. "That's the county responding to a legally recorded deed discrepancy," I continued. "They have an obligation to verify boundaries when there's evidence the current ones are wrong." Richard swallowed visibly. "You caused this," he accused. I shrugged. I revealed the truth. "If that causes problems for your HOA, maybe the problem isn't me." He opened his mouth, closed it, then jabbed a trembling finger at me. "This neighborhood has existed for nearly 2 decades. You're not taking it from us." "Funny," I said, "because last year you took something from me. Pretty aggressively, if I recall. That zoning dispute was on land I owned." "You can't prove that." "Richard," I said gently, "they're literally here because I did prove it." Behind us, the survey team unloaded a ground-penetrating radar cart to begin subsurface checks. One resident gasped. Another muttered, "What is going on?" Someone else yelled for the HOA to get this under control. They couldn't, because control was something they never really had. By late morning, the neighborhood group chat was melting down. Bits of conversation floated through the air as residents whispered among themselves. Someone said we don't technically own our lots. This has to be a mistake. They can't take our houses. Right. My mortgage is on this address. What does that mean? This is insane. Who would do something like this? Who indeed? I walked past a group of worried mothers gathered by the playground. They stared at me like I was a specter, an omen, a shadow that had suddenly developed substance. One of them mustered the courage to speak. "Excuse me, is it true? Are we on your land?" I met her gaze calmly. She wasn't arrogant. She wasn't cruel. Just scared. "Yes," I said softly. "You are." She looked like she might collapse. The other mothers exchanged panicked glances. "But what's going to happen?" she whispered. "Our homes, our families." Her voice cracked. I sighed. This part, the part where innocent people felt fear, this wasn't the part one relished. They weren't the ones who destroyed my life. They weren't the reason I'd lost my business, my savings, my peace of mind. No, that honor belonged specifically to Richard Holston and the HOA board. But the residents? They were collateral in a war they didn't start. "It won't be sudden," I said gently. "I'm not here to make you homeless. I'm here to make things right." Her eyes softened, confusion mingling with hope. But then Richard's voice thundered behind me. "Do not speak to him. He is not authorized." The mothers flinched. Richard stormed toward us, waving a binder like a weapon. "Ladies, don't let him intimidate you. This is all a negotiation tactic. He wants to scare you into something." I turned slowly, meeting his glare. "Is that what you think, Richard? That I'm negotiating?" I asked quietly. He puffed his chest. "Of course you are. No rational person would try to evict an entire neighborhood. You just want money." I stepped closer until we were nearly nose to nose. "If I wanted money," I murmured, "you would be the last person I'd ask." His false bravado flickered like a dying light bulb. "Then what do you want?" he whispered. I leaned forward, letting him feel the weight of every wrong he'd done, every humiliation, every lie. "I want you," I said, "to understand that you never had power. You borrowed it. You wielded it carelessly. And now the bill has come due." Richard's jaw clenched. "You can't do this," he said, half a plea, half a threat. "I can," I replied, "and I will." Then I walked away, leaving him surrounded by frantic residents, county workers, and the crumbling illusion of control he'd clung to for years. Today was only the first strike. Tomorrow, they'd feel the second. The second strike wasn't a loud one. Not yet. It wasn't trucks or survey teams or legal documents shoved into trembling hands. It was something quieter, sharper, a surgical cut to the heart of the HOA power structure. Because before you take down an entire kingdom, you remove the throne. And the HOA boardroom, that was their throne. By Thursday evening, Grey Ridge Estates was vibrating with tension. Neighbors whispered on driveways. Cars moved slow on the streets. People paused conversations when I walked past, eyes following me with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and, strangest of all, hope. The board had tried to keep everything under wraps, but panic had a scent to it, a heaviness that settled over the whole neighborhood like fog. People felt it. They sensed something irreversible had been set in motion. And tonight, it was about to get worse. I arrived at the HOA clubhouse before the emergency board meeting began. The parking lot was full, SUVs and sedans lined up like soldiers standing at attention. The windows glowed with warm light, as if cheerfulness could mask the dread inside. I stepped out of my truck and took a slow breath. Tonight wasn't about shouting. Tonight wasn't even about revenge. Tonight was about truth. And truth had teeth. The moment I entered the boardroom, conversation stopped. 7 board members sat at a polished oak table, each with a binder open in front of them, pages bristling with sticky notes. Their faces were drawn tight, pale, sweaty, tense. Richard Holson sat at the head of the table, jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. Why is he here? Hissed one of the board members, a thin, sharp-featured woman named Beverly, who had fined me last year for having a non-neutral shed color. Richard rubbed his temples. He demanded to present documentation and threatened to escalate the situation legally if we refused. Because you do have to let the landowner speak, I added pleasantly as I pulled out a chair. Pretty sure that's in your bylaws. It is, muttered the treasurer. Beverly shot him a betrayed look. I sat today, slowly, calmly, letting the silence stretch until it became its own kind of pressure. Finally, Richard exhaled. Fine. What do you want to show us? I slid a flash drive onto the table. Everything I've already shown you, I said, but in a format your entire board can see at once. After a meaningful pause, Richard inserted it into the clubhouse monitor console. The screen flickered on. A map appeared, an aerial layout of the land. My land. The rectangular borders pulsing red around Grey Ridge Estates like a glowing warning. Board members leaned forward, eyes widening. This is a historical boundary survey. I began, dated 1974. It was misplaced in county archives for decades. But after a recent digitization update, it resurfaced. Outdated, Beverly snapped. Irrelevant. I clicked my remote. The next slide showed the 2005 subdivision plan overlaid on the original survey. The subdivision was shifted nearly 300 yards northeast. A perfect, devastating mismatch. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered a curse. But I wasn't done. Slide 3, the corrected county recorder's verification. Slide 4, the newly verified master deed. My name on it. Filed. Stamped. Irrefutable. Slide 5, the county-issued provisional halt order on all HOA-managed property activities, effective immediately. The board erupted. This is outrageous. There's no way. He's bluffing. We need a second legal opinion. Richard slammed a hand on the table. Quiet. The room froze. He turned slowly to me, voice trembling not with anger now, but with something closer to fear. What are you planning to do with this information? A fair question, and a delicious one. I folded my hands. Well, I said evenly, you remember last year when you took me to court over that workshop? When you told the judge I was encroaching on your land? Richard stiffened. And you fined me. I continued, publicly humiliated me, ruined my business. That was an enforcement of policy, he said defensively. Right, I said with a nod. Policy. I let that sink in. So here's what's going to happen now, I continued. I'm giving Grey Ridge Estates 90 days to renegotiate your use of this land. Richard blinked. Renegotiate? Meaning, I said, you're going to start paying for your land like tenants. The room exploded again. Pay! To him. This is to be illegal. You can't charge us rent on our own homes. They are not your homes, I said quietly. They are structures on land you don't own. Silence struck like lightning. A deep, still quiet, almost reverent. Beverly's voice broke it. This will destroy us. I felt something stir in my chest, something that should have been satisfaction, but instead felt strangely hollow. These are the legal consequences of the board's negligence, I said. You built on land you never verified. You erased boundaries. You altered maps. You ignored zoning complaints. The residents deserve better leadership. Richard bristled. Don't you dare act like you're their savior. I leaned back. I'm not, I said. I'm the reckoning. That's when the door burst open. A cluster of residents spilled in, faces flushed, voices frantic. Is it true? One man demanded. Are we being fined? Evicted? What is going on? The board stammered, floundering. So I answered for them. No one is being evicted, I said. But the HOA board has allowed all of you to live on land they never properly verified. I now legally own the land beneath your homes. A woman's hand flew to her mouth. A father pulled his daughter close. Someone muttered, "Oh, God!" I stood. This board, I continued, created this crisis. Not you. So in 90 days, when renegotiation begins, I intend to speak with every homeowner individually, fairly, transparently, without the board acting as gatekeepers. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hope, fear, relief, suspicion. Richard jumped to his feet. This is a hostile takeover. You can't divide the community like this. The community was divided long before I got here, I replied. You just hid it behind lawn regulations and paint color approvals. Gasps, whispers, one or two quiet nods. Richard pointed at me, hands shaking with fury. You're doing this for revenge, he spat. I stepped forward until I was inches from him. No, I said softly. Revenge would look very different. He paled. And trust me, I added, you'll recognize it when it arrives. Then I walked toward the exit, past the silent board, past the stunned crowd. But just before I reached the door, someone asked a question that made me stop. What happens after the 90 days? I looked over my shoulder. And what makes you think? I said, I'm going to wait that long. I left them with that. A promise, a warning, and the spark that would ignite the next phase. Because the third strike was done. The fourth, that one would make headlines. By the time dawn broke the next morning, Grey Ridge Estates was no longer the calm, orderly suburb it pretended to be. The air felt charged, like the minutes before a thunderstorm, when the sky holds its breath and waits for the first crack of lightning. Today wasn't the lightning. It was a rumble, the warning, the omen of what was coming. Because now that the HOA boardroom had been cracked open like an egg, it was time for the whole neighborhood to see just how rotten it truly was. And nothing exposes rot faster than truth delivered publicly. At 7:42 a.m., I walked into the county administration building, an old brick structure with flickering fluorescent lights and coffee stains on every surface. Bureaucracy lived here, and bureaucracy, when fed the right information, could be a weapon stronger than any gun or bulldozer. Ulrich was waiting for me in the hallway, wearing the same rumpled suit he always wore, sipping from a travel mug that smelled like burnt espresso and bad decisions. You're late, he said without looking up. You're early, I replied. I like to watch the clerks panic when I stand near the filing office. I smirked. You're a strange man, Ulrich. And you hide me anyway. He handed me a stack of folders. Thick ones. Everything is prepared, he said in a low voice. Complaints, violations, misappropriations, financial irregularities, everything the HOA has been doing for the last 12 years that can be prosecuted, investigated, or at the very least dragged into the light. Yes, I murmured, flipping the first folder open. That's exactly what I wanted. This was not revenge. Not yet. This was exposure. Because Grey Ridge Estates HOA didn't just bully residents. It didn't just fine people for trash cans or mailbox colors. It hid things, big things, Things I had uncovered while digging through their records during my battle last year. Things they thought they'd buried under piles of paperwork and legal jargon. They should have buried them deeper. With Ulrich beside me, we approached the clerk's counter. A shaky-looking man named Travis adjusted his glasses as we dropped the folders in front of him. "I need all of these formally filed," I said. "Time-stamped. Logged. Public record." He blinked at the sheer mass of papers. This is a lot." "It's about 20% of what I have," I said, "but it's enough for now." Ulrich added, his not exaggerating. Travis swallowed hard. "I'll, get the supervisor." Minutes later, a senior clerk, a sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Ortega, approached, flipping through the pages with growing disbelief. "These are serious allegations," she said. "Yes," I replied, "and every one of them is backed by evidence." She looked up. "Are you sure you want to do this? Once these are filed, investigations will begin. Audits, reviews, possibly criminal proceedings." "Exactly," I said simply. She gave a slow, knowing nod. "Then we'll begin processing immediately." As she walked away, Ulrich turned to me. "You know this will tear the board apart." "That's the plan." By mid-afternoon, the county's actions had reached the neighborhood. It began with rumors, little whispers trickling through text chains and porch conversations. "The HOA is under investigation. Something about missing funds. I heard the county froze their accounts. Someone said the president might get arrested." And then came the emails. Oh, the glorious emails. The county had sent official notices to every homeowner explaining that. A full audit of the HOA financial records was underway. All board-approved spending was suspended. Certain board members were being investigated for fiduciary misconduct. The HOA's authority to issue fines was temporarily revoked. Pending legal concerns involved zoning, misuse of funds, and mishandled permit applications. Chaos. Pure, unfiltered chaos. The HOA board had always ruled the neighborhood with the smug confidence of people who believed themselves untouchable. Now they were naked in the town square. I didn't need to watch the fallout firsthand, but I did. From the edge of the park, I watched residents gather in little clusters, murmuring heatedly. A man in a blue polo paced with his phone. If they froze the HOA's accounts, then who's paying for irrigation? The pool? The maintenance? A mother shouted, "What about the security gate? We paid thousands in dues." Another resident fumed. "If the board misuse our money, I want them prosecuted." One woman actually said, "Honestly, I'm kind of glad. They fined me last year because my kid's bike was visible from the sidewalk." That one made me almost smile. Then the clubhouse doors burst open, and out came Richard, face red, hair disheveled, tie crooked. He looked like a man drowning on dry land. Behind him trailed the other board members, all shouting over each other in a frantic attempt to regain control. "Everyone stay calm." Richard said, voice cracking, "This is all a misunderstanding." "Is it though?" a resident shouted. "We trusted you," another yelled. "You charged us fees for years, and now the county says you misreported thousands." Richard stammered. "Those were administrative errors. Minor discrepancies." "Minor," a homeowner barked. "The county said significant irregularities." "That's not minor." Richard's facade collapsed. He turned slowly and saw me standing at the edge of the field. His face drained of color. "You," he whispered. I didn't move. He stormed toward me, fury radiating off him like heat. "You did this," he hissed. "You filed those complaints." I raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware reporting illegal behavior was wrong. "You're destroying us." "No," I corrected. "You destroyed yourselves. I'm just making sure everyone sees the pieces." He shook with rage. "You're sick, twisted, delusional if you think the residents will side with you." As if on cue, someone shouted behind him. "Honestly, I'm starting to think he's the only one telling the truth around here." Richard whipped around. Stunned, the crowd murmured in agreement. Too late. He'd lost them. He spun back to me, voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want? Carter, what do you want from me?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. You took my home, I said. My business. My dignity. Now I'm taking something of yours. What? Your power. He flinched. And trust me, I continued, this is still the gentle part. Richard staggered back as if struck, because he knew this was nowhere near over. This was the rumble, the warning, the whisper before the scream. And the storm, the real storm, was just beginning. If the first 4 strikes were tremors, then Section 5 was a quake, the moment the ground split open beneath Grey Ridge Estates and the HOA finally realized there was no climbing out. Because audits and rumors are one thing, but consequences, real, tangible consequences, those hit like a hammer. And I had the hammer. The morning the letters went out, the sky was the color of steel. Heavy, unmoving, a blanket of gray that matched the mood of the neighborhood. I had stayed up half the night with Ulrich finalizing the documents, carefully crafted, legally airtight, and devastatingly clear. They weren't threats. They weren't warnings. They were reality, delivered in black and white. At 6:15 a.m., a fleet of USPS trucks rolled into Grey Ridge Estates, timed precisely, coordinated by Ulrich's obsessive planning. Mailboxes clanged open in perfect unison down the winding suburban streets. Each homeowner received a thick envelope, addressed from Carterland Holdings, LLC. Yes, I formed an LLC. You can do anything when your lawyer is a genius and slightly unhinged. Inside each envelope was a copy of the verified land deed, a map of the property boundaries, the county's provisional halt order, a breakdown of their home's location relative to my land, and finally, the lease proposal, a proposal that wasn't cruel, wasn't unreasonable, wasn't even exploitative, but it was firm. Every homeowner would need a land usage lease within 90 days. That was it. Clear, direct, legal, and the cost? Exactly $1 per year. Because this wasn't about draining them financially. This was about stripping the HOA of its tyranny, removing its stranglehold, dismantling its power structure so thoroughly it could never rise again. And most importantly, it utterly removed their ability to control anyone. Because the homeowners no longer answered to the HOA. They answered to me. The explosion began before sunrise. A man in a bathrobe stumbled into the street waving the papers. What the hell is this? A woman across the road yelled back. It said we have to sign a lease or we're trespassing. A teenager read the letter aloud on his driveway. Mom, it says he owns the land under the whole neighborhood. Panic spread like wildfire, quick, messy, and unstoppable. But very quickly, something else began to form beside the fear. Relief. Only $1. Wait, he's not evicting us. So we get to stay. He's charging us less than Netflix. A cluster of residents gathered under the community gazebo, flipping through the documents. One man laughed bitterly. We've been paying $440 a month to the HOA, and this guy charges us $1 a year. That's honestly kind of incredible, someone said. It's more than incredible, another muttered. It's humiliating for them. And then came the question, quiet at first, then louder. So, why did the HOA lie about the land in the first place? Because now the spotlight had shifted, not to me, to them. Richard saw it happening, and he didn't take it well. He sprinted out of his house, shirt untucked, face flushed with panic. Everyone, stop. Nobody sign anything. He's manipulating you. A homeowner waved a paper at him. Why didn't you tell us we weren't on HOA land? We were. Richard stammered. This is a misunderstanding. The county disagrees, a mother snapped. And frankly, at this point, I trust him a hell of a lot more than I trust you. You're blowing this out of proportion. Richard insisted. No, I said from behind him. They are finally seeing the truth. He spun around. You son of a... Careful. I warned. You're in public. Richard's jaw clenched. You won't get away with this. I already have, I said calmly. A circle formed around us, neighbors watching, waiting. Richard sees one of my letters from a homeowner, waving it hysterically. This, he shouted, is coercion. It's illegal. No one is required to sign anything, I said loudly. But legally, without a lease, you are occupying land you don't own. I'm giving you a fair, symbolic agreement instead of eviction. People murmured. You're giving us more rights than the HOA ever did, someone said. Richard froze. I smiled slightly. Funny, isn't it? Another homeowner spoke up. This lease says we don't have to follow HOA lawn rules anymore. And no architectural approvals, someone else added. And no fines. A cheer, actual cheer, rippled through the crowd. Richard's face went from red to white to something between both. You're destroying this community, he snapped. No, I said. I'm freeing it. But the final blow wasn't the letters. It was what happened next. A resident stepped forward, a woman in a blue cardigan, eyes blazing with conviction. My name is Linda Harrow, she said loudly, and I moved to call a special election to dissolve the HOA board. Gasps! A murmur spread. That's not allowed, Beverly snapped, shoving her way through the crowd. Yes, it is, Linda said, holding up a copy of the bylaws. Article 12. A special election can be called with 25% homeowner signatures. And guess what? People are lining up. She pointed past me. I turned, and what I saw was beautiful. A line of residents, dozens long, forming near the playground, signing their names on petition taped to a folding table. One man shouted, "Why did we ever need an HOA anyway?" Another said, "They ruined more lives than they helped." And then someone yelled, "Carter, put your name on it." I blinked. I'm not a resident. This is your fight. Yeah, a dad said, but you're the reason we finally realized the HOA didn't own us. Richard looked like he might collapse. This isn't happening, he whispered. It is, I said softly, and you brought it on yourself. He stumbled back, eyes glassy, watching as homeowner after homeowner signed the petition to end his reign, to take back their power, to reclaim their neighborhood from the chokehold he'd built. And as I watched the signatures pile up, I felt something shift in my chest. Something warm. Something unexpected. Maybe revenge wasn't the only thing happening here. Maybe I was giving these people something they didn't know they were missing. Freedom. By sunset, over 70% of the neighborhood had signed. The HOA was done. Finished. Powerless. But if Grayridge thought this was the end, they were wrong. Because Section 6, the final strike, was still coming. Arnie was halfway down the gravel ridge road when the first siren wailed behind me, echoing across the valley like a war cry. It wasn't police. No, that sound I knew. This was something else. A fire truck. Then another. A whole convoy. And I knew exactly where they were going. Straight to the clubhouse. Straight to the match Jack had lit. For a second, I considered stopping. Turning around. Doing something. Not to save the HOA, but to confirm what I suspected. Instead, I pulled over and stepped out, climbing onto a rocky outcrop where I could see the whole basin laid out below me. The HOA's multimillion-dollar clubhouse, their pride, their temple of arrogance, was belching black smoke into the sky. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't part of the plan, I muttered, but maybe it was part of Jack's. Before I could think it through any further, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, enjoying the view. The voice was smooth, amused, and clipped with a familiarity I didn't expect. I stiffened. Who is this? Oh, come on. You've met me. Or rather, you've met the version of me they hired to keep you away. Then it hit me. The lawyer. The one who'd shown up late, rushed, anxious, and too eager to get out. The one who had everything to lose if the HOA folded. Jack! I said quietly. Bingo! I clenched my jaw. What the hell did you do? The clubhouse. He chuckled. That was already doomed. Wiring violations everywhere. I just encouraged fate a little. The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he was describing the weather, not arson. But that's not why I'm calling. I waited. I think we should meet, he said, face to face. Neutral ground. The old water tower on the ridge. You know the one. I looked up toward the rusted silhouette against the horizon. Why? I asked. Because the game isn't finished. His tone sharpened. And there's one thing you don't know yet. The line clicked dead. The water tower loomed overhead like a skeletal giant as I parked and stepped out. Wind whipped through the dead weeds. Rust rattled. And sitting casually on the concrete base with Jack, hands folded, posture relaxed, eyes bright with something between triumph and madness. "You came," he said, smiling. "I'm here for answers. You'll get them." He pushed off the concrete and walked slowly toward me, hands in his pockets. "You've done impressive work. Better than I expected. Buying the land without them noticing, forcing the HOA to expose itself, bringing in the auditors, beautiful. I didn't do it for your approval." "No," he agreed. "You did it for revenge." He paused. "But did you ever stop and ask yourself who gave you the first clue? Who led you to look into the land titles? Who directed the auditors to your doorstep?" My pulse stuttered. "What are you talking about?" "It wasn't a coincidence." His grin widened. "I helped you. I nudged. I fed. Quietly. Efficiently. And why? Because this HOA, these people, they were never just your enemy." I stared. "Then whose enemy were they?" He spread his hands like he was revealing a sunrise. "Mine." For a moment, the wind was the only sound. "This started long before you arrived," he continued. "They screwed me years ago, buried my development deal, ruined my bid for a seat on the county council. I could have sued, yes, but litigation is boring." He shrugged. "Revenge should be art." Pieces clicked together in my mind, a puzzle I never realized I'd been assembling backwards. The anonymous tip, the sudden availability of certain documents, the conveniently timed leaks, the attorney who represented the HOA but didn't defend them. "You used me," I said. "No," he corrected gently. "I partnered with you. You wanted blood. I wanted ruin. And you were perfect. You burned down a building. It was symbolic." He waved a hand. "Besides, no one was inside." I stepped closer, anger flaring hot. "You manipulated me." "Perhaps." His grin dropped, replaced by a colder expression. "But I'm offering you something now. A choice." He reached into his coat. I tensed, but he pulled out nothing more dangerous than a thick white envelope. "Inside is a final set of documents," he said. "Proof that the HOA leadership personally profited from illegal easements, tax evasion, kickbacks from contractors, enough to ensure they'll never claw their way back, not financially, not legally, not socially." I didn't move. "Why give this to me?" I asked. "Because you earned it." He extended the envelope. "You get the glory of finishing what you started." "And you?" He laughed softly. "I'll disappear. My part is done." I stared at him. "I don't trust you." He leaned in, voice lowering. "You don't have to trust me. You just have to decide who you want to be when this ends." He set the envelope on the ground between us, then stepped back, hands raised. "Your choice," he repeated. Then he walked past me. Calm, easy, as if the world wasn't burning behind us. I didn't pick up the envelope right away. I stood there for a long time, listening to the distant sirens, the crackle of fires, the chaos I'd unleashed, and the opportunity now sitting at my feet. Was I really going to finish this? Destroy them completely? Or was this the moment I proved I was better than they ever were? But then I remembered every letter, every fine, every threat, every smug smirk, every piece of my father's land ripped from us because of their greed. Every night I stayed awake plotting all this. Revenge wasn't poisonous. It was clarifying. I bent down and lifted the envelope. It was heavy, thick with paperwork and the weight of finality. The next morning, when the sun climbed over the ridge, I walked into the county office carrying the envelope. People whispered as I passed. News had already spread. The fire, the ownership revelation, the collapse of the HOA. Everyone was waiting to see what I'd do next. I placed the envelope on the clerk's desk. "This," I said, "needs to go to the state investigators." The clerk looked up at me slowly. "You sure about this?" I nodded. Yes. She took it carefully, as if it were explosives. Maybe it was. I stepped outside. Cold morning air filled my lungs. The HOA wasn't just finished. It was buried. And the land, my family's land, was finally, fully, legally, indisputably mine. Not even Jack could undo that. I didn't know where he'd gone, or if our paths would ever cross again. But one thing was certain. Revenge wasn't the end. It was the beginning. A new empire would rise on those 1,500 acres. And this time, no one would stand in my way.